Hello students and welcome to chapter 3.5, and this is video 1 in this chapter. So this chapter is the 5th chapter in topic 3. So we've just finished final accounts if you're going sequentially, and now we're going into ratios, profitability and liquidity. And in this chapter we're going to go through 5 different ratios. There's going to be 3 profitability/efficiency ratios and 2 liquidity ratios. In this video we're going to do gross profit margin and profit margin. So what exactly is ratio analysis? Well, ratio is like this over here. You can see that 4:3 or 4/3. These are both kind of 2 versions of ratios. Historically, normally we see this as the ratio, but it's basically one number divided by the other one. And it's a method of analyzing the financial performance of a business. And here we're going to be comparing 2 numbers. And we normally take them from the profit and loss and or the balance sheet, but they can come from anywhere. But the ones we're going to look at in this chapter are from those 2. And their use is basically to look at the financial performance of the business, but specifically it can be over time. So you can compare these ratios between one year and the next. But another way you can do it is by looking at other businesses in the industry. So you can compare the ratios for 2 businesses within the industry. Like I said, we're going to look at 3: profitability, liquidity, and efficiency. And just here is a quick reason we might look at it. So business A and business B, you can see both of them make a gross profit of 100 million. But you can see that business A is making it from a smaller revenue. So you could say that in this situation, business A is doing better, because if they doubled their revenue to 600 million, like business B, then in theory, their gross profit would double as well. So this is what we're going to look at in this video. So first one we're going to do is gross profit margin. And more specifically, a profit margin is how successfully a business is turning its revenue into profit. And the gross profit margin looks at gross profit divided by sales revenue times 100. So let's do the calculations and then we'll explain what it means. So using the profit and loss for Charles's chairs that we did in 3.4. So go back to 3.4 if you've not done the profit and loss, because you kind of need to understand that to do the ratios. Then what we do is we take the gross profit, which is this one here of 2,000. We divide that by the revenue, which is 4,000, and then we multiply by 100%. Multiply by 100 to get 50%. So the important thing here is the profit margins are percentages. And what these represent is basically this percentage is the profit made on just the production and sale of the product. So we're not considering expenses yet. We'll do that in a minute. So in this situation, 50% of the revenue is kept as profit. So you can see clearly here, the numbers are quite nice. So half of the revenue is kept as profit. And so therefore the profit margin is 50%. And obviously the higher, the better. And what that means is that the sales revenue in comparison to the cost of sales is a lot better. And so we get to keep more of the gross profit, more of the sales revenue as gross profit. So that's the calculations. And clearly we want the gross profit margin, all other things being equal, we want that to be as high as possible. And so how do we actually increase the gross profit margin? Well, one question that might come is, well, why don't we just make more money, make more revenue? So surely if we double the revenue, then the gross profit margin will go up. Well, not necessarily, because in this situation, the revenue is doubled from 4,000 up to 8,000. But if we're selling more products, then we need to produce more products. And remember, the cost of sales represents the cost of actually producing those products. So if we're selling double the products and we double our sales revenue, then unless things change, we're going to double our cost of sales. So you can see here that the sales revenue and the cost of sales will double, and also the gross profit. And so the gross profit margin here will remain at 50%. So you can see that, yeah, the 2025 gross profit margin will be 4,000 divided by 8,000 times 100, which gives us 50%. So just doubling the revenue won't necessarily change the gross profit margin unless other things change and maybe the business gets economies of scale or things like that. So to increase the gross profit margin, we effectively need to raise revenue by more than the cost of sales. And so things that might work here are things like marketing strategies to boost sales, alternative revenue streams, so we end up getting money from elsewhere, or changing the price. But we've got to be really, really careful with price, because if we increase the price, then in theory, some customers will go and buy substitute products, or they won't buy the product at all. So we will end up losing sales, because if price goes up, less people are going to buy the product. So in this situation, if the product is inelastic, so inelastic means that if the company puts the price up, then the number of people that buy it will go down, but it will be by a smaller amount than the price goes up. Or if the product is elastic, which means if they put the price up, then lots of people will go to the alternative. What they could do is reduce the price instead. Go and have a look at the pricing strategies in the syllabus in Marketing 7Ps if you want to know more details about that. So other things they could do is cut cost of sales. And this is probably the most common version. So basically, we try and produce the same number of products, but we do it in a more cheaper way. So maybe we use cheaper suppliers, we use cheaper labor, or we lower wages for our staff, or we could, in theory, increase productivity. So we could automate production, we could train staff, and that will then lower the cost of sales. One problem here is, in the short term, if we use cheaper materials, then that will boost gross profit margin. But in the long run, then some customers might end up not buying the product because they see that the product isn't as good quality as before. So I've got another example here. I'm just going to have to move my head. But in order to boost the profit margin, you can see that we've done that here. So we've gone from the sales revenue has doubled from 4,000 up to 8,000, but the cost of sales only gone up by 1,000. And now the profit margin, gross profit margin, is 5,000 divided by 8,000, which is 62%. So in order to boost the gross profit margin, we need to boost this revenue by more than the sales overall. Right, let's move on to the profit margin, which we can go through fairly quickly because it's kind of very similar. So profit margin is a very, very similar one, but instead of using gross profit divided by sales revenue, we use profit before interest and tax. So in this situation, we do 1,000, which is the profit before interest and tax, divided by the sales revenue, 4,000 times 100, which gives us 25%. You may see this as the operating margin because some profit and losses, the profit before interest and tax is also known as the operating profit. So this measures overall profitability after all costs have been removed. So some could argue that it's a better measure of profitability than the gross profit margin because now we're minusing the expenses, whereas the gross profit margin just ignores expenses. So it is a kind of a better representation, though the gross profit margin is also relevant. We could also use the profit for period. So you can see that here we also need to minus interest and tax. So we could use this profit number down here. Now, one reason we tend not to do that is because tax rates might change over time, which means that it can be more difficult to compare the margin over time. And also, if you're comparing the profit margin between two different businesses in two different countries, then it might be more difficult to compare because they have different tax rates. And also, because we need to minus interest as well, two different businesses might have two different levels of debt. One might be more focused on share capital and one might be more focused on loan capital. So the interest numbers would be very different. So the better ratio we tend to use is the profit before interest and tax. In order to increase that, well, it's very similar as per the gross profit margin. So we basically want to boost revenue by more than we boost sales. We can also cut sales, but also we can actually cut expenses as well. So things like we could reduce utilities, we could reduce managers' salaries. One other thing would be, what about if we increase the marketing budget? If we increase the marketing budget, it's going to increase expenses, but it will increase sales. It will increase cost of sales because we're going to be producing more because we sell more, and also increase expenses because of the marketing. So the overall effect is actually very difficult to know because it depends on how much these actually change over time. So let's do a couple more examples and then I'll leave you. So here are some numbers for a business from 2023 and 2024. Calculate the gross profit margin. So the first thing we can do is for 2023, we do the gross profit 1,500 divided by 4,300 times 100. And we do the same thing for 2024. So you can see that the business is making more money in 2024 and also the margin's gone up. So you can see that they're actually making more money and they're doing better with that revenue overall. Profit margin, we just use the numbers down here. So 300 over 43 etc., etc. And you can see that their profit margin has doubled over this time period. So not only are the numbers better, but their profit margins are getting better. So they're controlling their expenses better overall. Moving on to the second example, we can compare two businesses instead. So on the left, we've got numbers for business A in 2023. The M stands for million. And on the right-hand side, we've got business B. And so we have to calculate the gross profit margin and the profit margin for business A and business B. So again, we just follow the same system. For business A, we do the 30 divided by 80 times 100. For the profit margin, we do the 5 divided by the 80. And we get 37.5 and 6.25%. Doing the same for business B, we get 66.67% and 13.33. So what we can see here is these are two businesses within the same industry, let's assume. And so the business on the left makes a higher profit because they make 5 million rather than 2 million for B. But business B has better margins. So you can see that they're controlling their costs a bit better. So just putting some examples here, maybe business A is Walmart, where they're trying to sell a much higher amount of goods. They're selling 80 million rather than 15 million. Clearly, Walmart would be selling a lot more than 80 million, but just go with the example. So business A is trying to sell more products with a smaller margin, whereas business B is maybe more niche, maybe more luxury, where they're actually selling less, but their margins are much better, but they're still making less overall. So just because the margins are better doesn't mean that the profit number's better as well. It just, some businesses will aim for high margin, some businesses might be low margin and try and sell lots of products in order to make more money that way. Okay, we've covered all of those. In the next video, we'll finish off the chapter. I'll see you then.